Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Urmi, and in today's video we'll be basically doing the sequel of our first video. I am joined today by Marco, who has the CFA designation as well as this CAIA designation, and we did a video together not too long ago where we spoke about our experience with the CAIA program. And we provided some tips, we provided information on the approved providers that we have used. And today we'll be doing a second part. So Marco, welcome back to my channel. How are you?
Thanks, fine. I'm glad to be here. And also, I hope you had a great vacation as well.
Thank you. I did. And now it's back to work.
Like all of us, no problem.
Yeah, indeed. So let's continue the conversation that we started a few weeks ago, where we spoke about our experience with CAIA. Today I want to focus more on other things such as ethics. So I know that in CAIA they usually, like, one of the things they tell you is that there is an ethics part, but it's not the same as the one that you see in the CFA program.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you first, how did you tackle that section? Because ethics, we know that it's pretty much like the one that you see in the CFA program, it's quite different from the one in CAIA. Because in CAIA you only have two readings, reading 1 and reading 2, and it's pretty much nothing related to ethics, but I don't know why it's called ethics.
Yes.
So I do want to ask first your opinion about that.
Yes. What I can remember the most is that I was expecting ethics to be very, very similar to the CFA program, but yeah, it was completely different. I recall that it was only focused to the asset manager code, which we only have a little bit on level 3 of the CFA program, and so for me it was a significant transition, because we were for the most part expecting to find something similar to the 3 levels of the CFA when it comes to ethics. There's a professionalism, duties to clients, duties to the employers, and all that. And then it was only focused on the asset manager. And some of the things, and this is where the difference it comes most up, is the fact that the asset manager code is much different, is much more specific to the role, of course, of the asset manager. Mm-hmm. And so because it's so specific, we are not as used to, when it comes to the practice questions, to really understand, all right, based on what I learned before, this must be the right answer and these must be the wrong answers. It's completely different. And yeah, it takes like almost learning everything from scratch, basically. Yeah. Of course, especially for candidates who start completely from brand new without having any background in terms of the CFA.
Yeah, I was also quite surprised to see that section of the program, because I was literally expecting like the difficult questions that we get when we take the CFA exams. Yeah. But it's totally different. It's really not that bad. I feel like it's an easy version of ethics, the one that you see in the CAIA program. And the thing about the CAIA program, because you have, if I'm not mistaken, 9 readings, and they have 9 readings, and basically like they already tell you what you will expect in the first part and in the second part, and they also tell you which readings you'll be expecting. So for instance, like in the morning session, you will have only questions from like reading 3 to 9, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And then in the second part, you will have questions related to reading 1, 2, and then also reading 3 to 9. So it's like, it comes to no surprise when you go to the exam. Like, you already know what you will be tackling at the exam. So I kind of like this structure because I think it was clear, it was transparent. Yeah. The only downside is that when it comes to reading 1 and 2, they're pretty long. They're like so long, they're heavy. Like they're so detailed, and they're not in the textbook. They're like additional links that they give you on websites.
PDF files.
Yeah, so I want to ask you what you thought about that. and how you studied those sections.
Yes, well, my approach, I cannot recommend to anyone because it was very specific and a little bit tactical, but because at the time, even though I took 6 months to prepare for the exam, from October the 3rd, 2022 until my exam on March 31st, 2023, I recall that I saw the topic weightings, and because I was working full-time as well, it was a quite demanding job in terms of the hours that I had to put in. I decided sort of a different strategy relative to the ones I used with the CFA, in which I saw the topic weightings and I saw the morning version, which has the 100 multiple choice questions with the only with questions from chapter 3 to chapter 9. I felt that, all right, apparently it pays more to dedicate more time to chapters 3 to 9 and devote a little bit less attention to the basically the chapters 1 and 2, especially because I was not very into those topics, especially when it comes to cryptocurrencies and all that. And I decided, right, I'm going to put most of my chips, so to speak, in chapters 3 to 9, and I'm going to do some light reading of chapters 1 and 2 and hope that they are not that difficult in terms of the questions in the exam. It turned out well because not only because I ended up passing, but for me it was kind of 50-50 in terms of the performance of the exam. I think I did half of the questions, open-ended questions in the afternoon for chapters 1 and 2. The other half, I think I left them either blank or I did some sketchy answers because I was not really sure what was the answer. But I think it pays off if you focus more on chapters 3 to 9, but of course I cannot really directly recommend to someone, hey, skip chapters 1 and 2 and focus on 3 and 9, but this is my approach, and for me, yeah, worked well.
Okay, so I know we spoke about it before. That wasn't really my approach exactly. I did focus a lot of my time doing chapters 3 to 9.
Yes.
And because with chapters 1 and 2, like, the questions were not basically going to be asked in the first session. They were going to be asked in the second session of the exam. You had no chance but to be able to answer them. So I didn't actually completely read any of those additional readings from reading 1 and 2, but I did watch videos about them because
helps.
Yeah, so that's how I prepared, and I did a lot of practice to basically understand reading 1 and 2, because I'm not someone who likes to do passive learning. Like, I could read all those pages from those websites that we were given, but they were so long, and I was like, I don't want to waste my time. And so what I did is I actually followed I watched the videos from Uppermark, and they would actually come up with slides. So they would give you slides, and then you would basically like study. Yeah. And then you will do the problem. The problem with chapter 1 and 2 is that it's like there's so much memorization, and they're not interesting because you have like regulations. You have to memorize all these regulations from like all these countries. You have to, like, what is it? You said cryptocurrency. Like, some of the things were so technical that it's like what am I getting with this? You know? So it was like, for me, it's a little bit like you. I also felt that I had to focus most of my time doing readings 3 to 1, but I don't suggest that people skip reading 1 and 2 because you still have like a lot of sub-reading within those readings. So it's important to do them, but you have to find the best strategy to do those 2 readings.
Absolutely. And just as you said, those topics are so specific, and also because they are emerging, they are relatively new. So I would not expect that the average candidate would have much knowledge about these topics unless he works in that particular industry. But given the weight that they have, the length, and as you said, some of the boredom of going through those, and basically you are putting in a lot of your time and a lot of your work, and for a very low return given the weighting on the exam. So I felt I'm going to make some sort of choice and focus on the chapters 3rd to 9th.
Yeah, so there was so Russell from Edge Designation.
Edge designations, yes.
Yeah, he actually said that if you get 70% in the first session or in the first section of the exam and you don't get anything in the second session or the second part, you still pass the exam. That's what he said.
Yeah, he told me also as well in one of those webinars that he did at the time. But still,
you have to be lucky to get 100% to get that 70%.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also you have to keep in mind that your performance is always measured against the pool of candidates that are sitting alongside you. So if you happen to be unlucky and sit with a very competitive pool of candidates, you have to perform very, very well, and it's super difficult.
It's difficult, So I do want to ask you one last question before we go, which is still related to reading, and it's about the order. Like, what order did you use to start studying? Like, did you follow 1, 2, 3, 4, or did you do like a random thing?
Yes, I'm going to answer this question in 2 different ways, because I followed a specific order. But then, looking back, and a few months after the exam, I felt this could be done much better in a faster way with a different order. And I even recorded the video on my YouTube channel with a specific order that I would use if I would do the exam again. But to answer your question, first and foremost, when I was preparing myself for the first time, I just followed the order of the topics from 1 to 9, but again, chapters 1 and 2 very light, just did a brief summary of those, and then chapters 3 to 9. If I would come back to the exam, I would say let's start by the easiest ones and the ones that are a little bit more theoretical, because especially for CFA charter holders, it's much easier to remember certain concepts that we learned before. And so I remember that at the time I recall that I would start by chapter 4, which is institutional investors. Also the chapter 5, which I believe is risk management, because we have all those cases of past scandals and losses. If you are familiar with those, it's accessible, I would say. Also, again, chapter 7, because chapter 7, which I believe is accessing alternative investments, if I'm not mistaken. It's also one that it's a little bit more difficult, but given the concepts that I had on the CFA, it was feasible. And then I would go to the 8th, which for me is probably one of the hardest because of the due diligence, but because it's so theoretical. And we have a reading in the CFA program, which is also the manager selection. I could relate to some of those topics, and so for me, even though it was very long and dragged out, for me it was kind of the next one that I would do. And then coming back to the most practical ones at the end. Chapter 3, which is the models. Chapter 6, which I believe is methods and alternative investments as well, in which I think you have to do some certain calculations, so it takes a little bit also more time for you to go. And then the last one, which I believe, chapter 9, I believe is the most difficult one for the average candidate without any CFA background, which is a volatility, super focus on options and insurance and all that. So I think this one should be left for last, because it's the one that probably will take you the most time, even probably more than the chapter 8, which is very, very long.
Yeah, so I can share how I studied. I also started with reading 4. Because it was about institutional investors. It was something that I already knew from the CFA program. And then I think I followed the order. So I did like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I did 3. Yeah, or I did 3 somewhere in between. But basically, I also felt a little bit like you that chapter 8 or reading 8 was pretty difficult because it was just so much information, very detailed. You have to memorize everything. I also felt like reading 9 was also difficult. And I do agree that for someone who does not have the CFA background, it is a difficult reading. And then I also felt that even reading 3 was not so easy. Like you needed to have that background in the CFA because, it talks about all these modules that you learn in the CFA program. So if you don't have that background, it's hard. And reading 1 and 2, I left them at for the very last because it was pretty much memorization besides one reading, where you have to do all those calculations like replications, where I put a lot of time into that. But I know that I spent a lot of time doing reading 3 to 9 a lot, and I was always revising those readings because there was way too many information, way too many. Yeah.
And I remember, for example, chapter 3, even though it's just model, so someone who may be a little bit better in mathematics with a mathematics background might be able to go through it. I remember that, for example, for an average candidate without any CFA background, it would struggle, for example, in the differences between the Holy model and the Cox-Ross model, because even though those are risk related and based on interest rates, the inner linings of those models for an average candidate, I believe it's something difficult to grasp.
I agree. I definitely agree with you. So I think that's pretty much about our second part, and I think we have covered pretty much everything. Yes. Maybe before we go, maybe each one of us can share some best practices or best tips for the students out there who want to take the CAIA exams. So maybe let's start with you, Mark. What would you say?
Yes, well, based on my experience with the exam, and also because I already had some background in terms of preparation because of the CFA, I believe that it's extremely key to start early. For me, it's absolutely non-negotiable. Also, not only because I've been also working for full-time every time I was preparing for an exam, but also because my method of study is quite time-consuming, because I like to make a summary first and foremost of all the curriculum, a brief summary, nothing too extensive, but it takes some time to understand the concepts and all that. And so, start early. This is absolutely non-negotiable. And also because, and I think we spoke about this earlier, when it comes to the use of the calculator and all that, it's very important for you to practice as many questions as possible. So as soon as you go through the curriculum and have, let's just say, a broad overview and understanding of the curriculum, please do as many practice questions as possible. And by doing that, even repeating those over and over again, you will understand the entire curriculum from end to end in terms of application of the concepts in the practice questions, and with the knock-on effect, positive one, of understanding the ins and outs of your calculator. And so when it comes to particular questions in which you have to use it, you will know right away, in a blink of an eye, what are the calculations you need to make, and your operation of the calculator will be smooth sailing from here on in. And so I think these are, as soon as you follow this approach, and you have enough time, of course, to do that, I believe that there is almost no way that you will fail the exam. It takes time, but it pays off at the end.
Yeah, I also agree with the 2 tips that you have provided, and I was also going to share the same tips. The additional one that I would have said, it's probably to always be consistent with the studying. Like if you're studying and if you're working full time, always make sure that you do allocate some time. It doesn't have to be 3-4 hours, but even 2 hours, they do make a difference. And to always study, every single day to study, because 6 months, they go by really fast. The materials are a lot. They're very much detailed. So you want to make sure that you're studying every day.
Absolutely. And I would add to that the fact, which we mentioned about in the other video, which is as long as you do this, you will have such an edge on your competition, because in our experience in the WhatsApp group of edge designations, it was completely quiet in my case, because my exam was in March. Up until January, it was completely quiet. Nobody cared about studying, and then from February onwards, the last 2 months of the exam, it basically exploded with everyone asking questions left and right. And by that time, those were pretty easy questions for you to tackle. But for some people, those were complex. So if you do this approach, you start early, as you said, being consistent every single day, even if it's half an hour, you will have such an edge on your competition. And given that you are tested against a pool of candidates that sit also on the same testing room as you, you will be at the top of that pool for sure. There is no two ways about it. It's absolutely almost a complete guarantee.
Yes, definitely. Well, Marco, thank you so much for all these tips and your wisdom. I think we had great 2 sessions, and I'm pretty sure that all the candidates will find this information valuable. Before we go, do you want to share to the audience where they can find you and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have my own YouTube channel. I have several topics, of course, in there. Also some videos about the CFA, the CAIA as well, which is marcoafonsocfa, all together, all in sequence, without any dots or any special characters. And they can also find me on LinkedIn. It's marcoafonsocfa. It's very easy to find. I have a white shirt and a tie as well, so there is no they can't go wrong in finding me.
They can't go wrong.
Yeah.
All right, Marco.
It's my pleasure.
I will put all the links in the description below. And once again, I want to thank you for being here with me.
It's my pleasure, and I wish you the best success now with the new designation, and also with the channel as well. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.